So Netflix recently released this TV series called Scoop, which talks about the difficult life of journalists in India. Now, we always knew that the life of journalists in India is very difficult. They routinely face abuse and pressure from the criminal syndicates and the underworld dons. But equally, they are also pressurized by the government authorities and the government officials. But just how bad is the situation for journalists? And how does India compare against other countries of the world? Now, to understand this, there is an index called the World Press Freedom Index, which is published by this organization called Reporters Without Borders. So what they do is they analyze the journalistic landscape of different countries based on 5 parameters and then produce a score and a rank for each country. And in these World Press Freedom Index for 2023, India ranks at 161 out of 180. Now that in itself is not very surprising. We are used to seeing India feature low on many global rankings. But when I looked a little closer into this, I found 2 countries which are ranked better than India. The first country was Pakistan. Now, this made me raise my eyebrow a little bit. A quasi-democratic country which is practically run by the army and the ISI has better press freedom than India. That sounds a little shady, but okay, let's accept that. But the second country that I saw in that list, which is ranked higher than India, was Afghanistan. So according to RSF, under the Taliban, the press freedom in Afghanistan is better somehow than India. Now, being a geek for all things data and numbers, I had serious doubts on the credibility of this report. So I immediately wanted to break it up and look under the hood and see what's going on in these press freedom rankings. So in today's video, we will talk about all the things that are wrong with the World Press Freedom Index. Okay, before we begin, let's first lay out some ground rules and disclaimers. So India by no means is a haven for journalism, or I don't claim that there's nothing wrong with the world press freedom in India in today's time. With the advent of social media and the increased polarization around the world, press has come under a lot of pressure worldwide, and India is no exception. In India as well, there are a lot of things that are wrong with how we treat our journalists, and a lot that we need to work on. But with that said, our goal in this video is to retain objectivity and just look at facts and figures and speak about them. So with that out of the way, let's now dive into how these rankings are generated. Now, in the RSF website, when you look at the Press Freedom Index rankings, you will see that there is a section for methodology where the research have listed out the detailed methodology that they've used in generating these rankings. So we're off to a good start already. Now, when you look at this, you will see that they mention that the rankings are made based on a mix of qualitative and quantitative elements, which is how most rankings are formulated. So the quantitative part shows you some pattern or truth, and the qualitative part goes further in explaining why that pattern is emerging, or give a little more description about the numbers itself. The 5 parameters that are used in formulating the World Press Freedom Index are political context, legal framework, economic context, socio-cultural context, and safety. So far, so good. But when you look at what percentage of these rankings are coming from the qualitative part versus the quantitative part, things start to unravel slightly. So out of the 5 parameters, only 1 parameter, which is the safety ranking, has a quantitative element attached to it. And even within that, only 1/3 of the component is coming from hard data or facts. The rest of it is coming from a qualitative questionnaire that is being floated to certain respondents. And the percentage of this survey which accounts for the quantitative part is only about 6.5%. The rest of it is coming from the qualitative responses to this questionnaire. There is nothing inherently wrong with floating a survey to a bunch of people and trying to assess the mood of the population for a certain subject. This method is used in many scientific studies and exit polls, etc. So it is a tried and tested method. But what is really important when you conduct such surveys are two elements. One is the sample size, which is basically how many people do you reach out to with the survey, right? Now, you could talk to 5 of your friends and get their opinions on a particular subject and call it Mood of the Nation survey, but it's most likely going to be inaccurate. So, what happens is, in general, it is better to reach out to as many respondents as possible, because that improves something called as statistical significance, or to put it in plain English, it improves the dependability of your survey. In this case, RSF has reached out to 10 respondents from India. Now, for a country of 1.4 billion people, 10 respondents is not at all a sufficient size to get any sort of statistical significance. And therefore, it is natural that RSF does not report out any numbers on the statistical significance of this study. Now, the second most important parameter is the sampling bias. Now, when you float a survey, it is really important that the sample that you reach out to is an accurate representation of your entire population. Out of these 10 respondents, the segments of population that RSF has reached out to are made up of journalists, researchers, academicians, and human rights defenders. Now, we don't know anything about the demographic makeup of these people or what their political leanings and motivations are. And RSF in their methodology has not mentioned if they've applied any corrections to the calculation based on their political motivations or other aspects. Further, if you see the languages that this questionnaire is published in, it includes only one Indian language, that is Hindi. This automatically excludes all the regional media and the journalists that form the backbone of Indian journalistic landscape. All the journalists from working in the regional media of the South or the Northeast automatically get excluded. So I wouldn't say this is a very accurate representation of the entire Indian media landscape. Looking at all these inconsistencies, one begins to wonder if these are just blind spots in statistical knowledge or deliberate manipulation of data to drive an ulterior motive. For a second, let's focus on the quantitative part now. The safety score. Here, they've studied the number of cases where journalists have been murdered or detained or abused, and they've formulated a score based on the number of abuse cases of journalists. Obviously, the higher the number of abuse cases against journalists, the lower the score. But here, instead of just using a simple ratio of number of abuse cases per capita, which would have made more common sense, they've resorted to using a complex log function. Now, looking at this log function, any layperson might just get scared and think that itna complex equation hai to sahi hoga. But upon closer inspection, you will see that this severely puts countries with higher population at a disadvantage. Now, let's take a quick example. Take two countries, A and B. Country A, let's say, has 10 lakh people and has seen one abuse case against a journalist. And country B, in comparison, has 100 crore people, which is 1,000 times more than country A. And let's say they have seen 2 journalist abuse cases in a year. Common sense would tell you that because country B has such a low per capita abuse cases against journalists, that is a safer country for journalists. But not according to this formula. This formula will give country A score of 28.57, while country B receives a score of only 23.09. This is very strange. Now, here's how this inconsistency plays out in real life. So, in 2021, Afghanistan has 7 murders of journalists, including media workers, whereas India had 4 murders of journalists. Now, both of these stats are really bad, but you also have to take into account that India has A, less number of murders, and B, India is a much larger country than Afghanistan. So, according to all the parameters considered, India should be ranked better than Afghanistan, right? You would think so, but you would be absolutely wrong. India in 2021 ranked at 142 and Afghanistan ranked at 122. How they arrived at these rankings is again a mystery to me. Now, if you are not already convinced that something is seriously wrong with these reports, let me draw your attention to a few more specific comparisons to clarify this a little more. Right now, India's global score ranks us at 161 below Pakistan and Afghanistan. But if I just look at the safety indicator for 2023, India is ranked at a staggering 172 out of 180. And you ask who all are ranked better than us? Well, Pakistan and Afghanistan, quite obviously, but also Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Palestine, both of whom are literally perpetual war zones, are ranked better than India. North Korea is ranked better than India, and not just better, but they're 16 places above us, and that is for security indicator, mind you. It is kind of becoming laughable at this point. But okay, now let's say RSF thinks that Modi government has taken over the political landscape and the economic landscape of India, and hence our scores in the political and economic indicators are down in the dumps, and I'm willing to accept that. But if there's one thing we all can agree upon, it is that judiciary in India is something that is still independent, it works, and it is non-corrupt by and large. Now, if I look at the legal indicator ranking, I would presume that the ranking of India here should be slightly better than the other indicators, and I would be right. India is ranked at 144, a huge step up from the 161 overall rank. But let's see some countries that are ranked better in this regard. Here's the list: Somalia, Pakistan, Palestine again. Civil war stricken South Sudan is ranked at 110, which is 34 places above us. And the fun one here is again Afghanistan. They are ranked at 145, just below India, and the score for their legal indicator is almost as much as India's. Now, I don't know how far our political leanings and our affiliations go in either justifying or questioning these reports. But if you're telling me that the legal and judicial landscape of India is the same as that of the Sharia courts of Afghanistan, I'm sorry, you must be into some really exotic substances. The problem with these rankings is that these are considered as serious evidence of a declining health of India's democracy. These studies then get quoted in international media and in left liberal circles as though they're hard proof, whereas the truth is that it is their own opinions that have gone into formulating these rankings in the first place. It is a vicious circle. It is kind of like a snake trying to bite its own tail. We just came out of the Karnataka elections where the ruling BJP lost the elections and conceded fair and square. We saw some excellent coverage from TV, print, and digital media from that campaign. So, India is a large country. It is also the most diverse country. India is also a country with extremely limited resources. So, it is only natural that we keep oscillating and experimenting between different political outfits every now and then. And that also changes who are the winners and losers in the media landscape. But that does not mean that we are worse off than a Pakistan or an Afghanistan. TV news channels are focusing more on tamasha and circus in the name of primetime news debates these days, and that is definitely concerning. But in spite of all these deficiencies, we still have institutions that work. We still have a thriving media landscape where new journalists want to keep coming year after year. In conclusion, I don't have any problem if RSF wants to write an op-ed article about the declining press freedom in India. But when you make it sound like you're getting these rankings through a rigorous scientific process, then you better have the decency and the integrity to follow the scientific best practices. Right now, these RSF rankings, according to me, are nothing more than pure garbage. That's it. Thank you.